So I want to talk about the lies that society in general, but more specifically the schools, taught us, brainwashed us. All the lies. What kind of lies? We're the exceptional country, land of the free, home of the brave, American exceptionalism. We're the best. We've got the best system in the world. Only our type of democracy works. Of course, you can make a point that the United States really isn't a democracy. You might say it's really an aristocracy, a kakistocracy, where the most corrupt rule. But being more specific, things like we invaded that country so we can give them freedom and democracy. I've seen this so many times because I was around during the Vietnam War. Since the Vietnam War, we're told repeatedly the same thing over and over and over again. We had to give those people freedom and democracy. That's why we invaded them. We had to kill those people to give them freedom and democracy. When I look back at what they taught me in school, I could see so many lies that I was taught. I'm surprised I could even think straight. Actually, it took me a long time to become unindoctrinated. It took me, in my mid-30s, I think I started waking up. In my 40s, I was really active in learning the information that would demolish all those lies I was taught. But let me continue on certain, more lies that I was taught. The Civil War was fought to free the slaves. Anybody with half a brain could figure out that's a total lie. All you have to know is logic and human behavior. America saved the world when they won World War II. That one was a little more difficult to figure out because you actually had to study what actually happened during World War II. As a matter of fact, if the US didn't even enter World War II, the Germans probably would have been defeated by the Russians. Because the Germans were already losing the war when the United States decided to enter the war. 9/11. Where do I begin? Now, it's kind of interesting because you can really determine the truth about history if you lived through history. Because this information that comes out at the time that it's happening, can't be censored by the government. And because information comes out at the time that it's occurring, you can actually piece together what the truth is. Of course, you have to do your research. You have to make sure that you're reading the news or looking at everything that's going on. But it's very hard today because of the way news comes out instantaneously, Things can't really be blocked or censored because they have to be analyzed to be determined whether it's good to censor that information or not. So as information's happening, it's coming out simultaneously and you're taking note of those details. So it's very hard for governments to fool people today if they're actually listening to what's going on. So, I lived through 9/11. 3 buildings in the World Trade Center complex Okay, the World Trade Center complex is made up of 7 buildings, and each one of these buildings is numbered 1 through 7. World Trade Center Building 1, World Trade Center Building 2 are the Twin Towers. But also World Trade Center Building 7 also collapsed. So you had 3 buildings collapse, but there were only 2 airplanes. How is that possible? How is it possible that buildings could collapse within their own footprint at the speed of gravity, which is at the speed of free fall, without it being a controlled demolition? The US government said those 3 buildings collapsed due to fires. Never has skyscrapers, or these large buildings made of reinforced steel and concrete, never, and you know, there's hundreds of thousands of these buildings all over the world, never have these buildings collapsed due to fire. But yet, we're to believe that 3 buildings collapsed on the same day. There's only one way that a building collapses at the speed of gravity within its own footprint, and that's through a controlled demolition. And yet when it happened, almost all of America believed what the US government said. And it's only now, almost 20 years later, that most Americans are starting to doubt the story. What's another lie that we were taught? Diversity is a strength. That's what we were taught. I mean, almost all Americans believe that that's America's strength. Diversity. Is diversity really a strength? Would we have had riots for the past 6 months? Would we have had billions of dollars of destroyed property? Would we be making quota systems, affirmative action, if we didn't have the diversity we have? Would we have to lower scholastic standards to accept people from certain groups if we didn't have the diversity we had? In what way is diversity an advantage? It's obviously a disadvantage. Lower workplace standards, crime between groups. Studies have shown that it has a negative effect on social cohesion. It's just another lie that the United States government fed us. So diversity isn't a strength, it's actually a weakness. Now maybe if they held everybody to the same standards, maybe it wouldn't be such a negative. But anyway, I digress. What I wanted to talk about was I see the future. And getting back to this diversity thing, which, you know, it's kind of like a comedic act. It's like a comedy show. You know, now you have Joe Biden wanting gender identity equity. I love this. So now you can't discriminate against gender identity. So we're going to have all these trans entering women's sports, entering women's prisons. I couldn't, you know, I can't make this stuff up. This is like something out of some fictional movie. This is great. All the problems, this diversity is gonna bite them in the rear. It's gonna bite them in the butt. This, we need equity. I foresee that this is gonna start destroying women's sports. This is gonna cause all kinds of problems in women's prisons and anywhere else. Eventually they'll probably have to change the law again. But this is great. I just love watching the US destroy itself in its many different ways. It's like watching a ship sink. Of course, you can't put it past the US to, as their empire begins to collapse, for the United States government to become violent, to rationalize warmongering. Having left the United States and renouncing my citizenship, I feel I have the experience to help other Americans do the same. Renouncing my citizenship would turn out to be one of the best economic decisions I would ever make. Not to mention the benefits to my physical and psychological well-being. Today, I consider myself a free man. If you need help leaving the United States, renouncing your citizenship, acquiring a new citizenship, or just someone to talk to help you on this difficult journey, then contact me by email and we can set up consultations. You can also donate to my PayPal account. The information is in the low bar.